Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtota Sata Srimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtota Sata Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sagaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Govinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Yamuna Maya Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading, are we on text 1 now, chapter 10? Okay. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3, chapter 10, text 1. Vidura uvacha antarhite bhagavati Brahma Lokapita Mahaha Prajaha Sasarja Katidhaha Daihikihi Manasihi Vibhuhu Vidura Uvacha Antarhite Bhagavati Brahma Loka Pitamaha Prajasa Sarja Katidha Daihi Kir Manasir Vibhu Vidura Uvacha Antarhite Bhagavati Brahma Loka Pitamaha Prajasa Sarja Katidha Daihi Kir Manasir Vibhu Vidura Uvacha Antarhite Bhagavati Brahma Loka Pitamaha Prajasa Sarja Katidha Daihi Kir Manasir Vibhu.
Antarhite Bhagavati Brahma Loka Pitamaha Rajasa Sarja Katidha katitha
Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Vidura uvacha
Vidura uvacha
Antarhite bhagavati
Antarhite bhagavati
Brahma lokapita maha
Brahma lokapitamaha
Rajasa sarja katidha
Rajasa sarja katitha
Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Viduruvacha
Viduruvacha
Antarhite bhagavati
Antarhite bhagavati
Brahmaloka pitamaha
Brahma lokapitamaha
Rajasa sarja katitha
Rajasa sarja katitha
Ahikir manasir vibhuhu
Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Vidura uvacha
Viduruvacha
Antarhite bhagavati
Antarhite bhagavati
Brahma lokapita maha
Brahma lokapitamaha
Rajasa sarja katitha
Rajasa sarja katitha
Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Viduruvacha
Viduruvacha
Antarhite bhagavati
Antarhite bhagavati
Brahmaloka pita maha
Brahma lokapitamaha
Rajasa sarja katitha
Rajasa sarja katitha
Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Matajis.
Viduruvacha Antarhite bhagavati Brahma lokapitamaha Rajasa sarja katitha Daihikir manasir vibhuhu Viduruvacha Antarhite bhagavati Brahma lokapitamaha Rajasa sarja katitha Daihikir manasir vibhuhu
Vidura uvacha. Sri Vidura said, Antarhite, after the disappearance, Bhagavati, of the personality of Godhead, Brahma, the first created living being, Lokapita Mahaha, the grandfather of all planetary inhabitants, Prajaha, generations, Sasarja, created, Katidhaha, how many, Daihikihi, from his body, Manasihi, from his mind, Vibhuhu, the great. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sri Vidura said, O great sage, please let me know how Brahma, the grandfather of the planetary inhabitants, created the bodies of the living entities from his own body and mind after the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Next text. Ye chame bhagavan prishtas tvai arta bahuvitama tan vadasvanupurvyena chindhi na sarva sangshayan. O greatly learned one, kindly eradicate all my doubts and let me know of all that I have inquired from you from the beginning to the end. Purport. Vidura asked all relevant questions of Maitreya because he knew well that Maitreya was the right person to reply to all the points of his inquiries. One must be confident about the qualifications of his teacher. One should not approach a layman for replies to specific spiritual inquiries. Such inquiries, when replied to with imaginative answers by the teacher, are a program for wasting time. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshru Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutaf Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Cha Shri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubi Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vikasa Swaminiti Namane Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschate Deshacharine Yasa Devi Parabhaktir Yata Tevi Tatagaro Tasyaite Katita Hyarta Prakashante Mahadmanaha. Okay, Viduru Vacha Antarhite Bhagavati Brahma Lokapita Mahaha Prajasa Sarja Katidha Daihi Kir Manasir Vibhuhu. Sri Vidura said, O great sage, please let me know how Brahma, the grandfather of the planetary inhabitants, created the bodies of living entities from his own body and mind after the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here we've just seen the Lord has appeared to Brahma and instructed him to create the material world. Now he has disappeared, and Brahma is in the situation where he has to go on with his service, taking the order of his spiritual master, who is Krishna himself, and following that through, following out his order. And even though the order that he has to fulfill is quite a tall order, to create the entire material universe, do the secondary creation, create all the planetary systems, create the living entities, all from scratch, basically. There's nothing there. And it's quite a daunting task for him. So now we're back to the conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. And Vidura is inquiring, let me know how Brahma, the grandfather of the planetary inhabitants, created the bodies of living entities. He wants to know the specifics of how these all things were created after the Supreme Personality of Godhead disappeared from his vision. And this whole phenomenon of receiving the order of the spiritual master and then having to go and fulfill that order without the direct presence of that spiritual master is something we see over and over again in devotional service. That you see specifically just with Srila Prabhupada himself, that he only met his spiritual master a handful of times and actually got his personal association just a few times like that. But he completely imbibed the mission and the desire of his spiritual master and made it one with his heart. Guru Mukha Padma Vakyachi Tete Koriya Aikya. He made this in his entire life. And although he was in a situation where he wasn't able to go join the temple full-time immediately and just do full-time service, only preaching work for his entire life, he was in the Grihastha ashram and he had responsibilities in that regard. He was running a business and such, providing for his family. He never lost sight of that the center of his life was to fulfill this order of his spiritual master. And in his case, of course, just to show us an example of what determination in devotional service looks like, what patience in devotional service looks like, Prabhupada, it took so many years and so many seeming failures on his part, that failures in terms of his preaching efforts. He went to Jhansi and started this league of devotees, and that fell apart. He was distributing his Back to Godhead magazines, and like a bull attacked him, and he was injured by that, and so many difficulties and trials and tribulations, you could say, in the path of trying to fulfill the order of his spiritual master. so many years, and nobody was joining, nobody was, really taking it up from his preaching work. And finally, of course, he came to America, and again, more struggle, he was completely alone, no association devotees, in the cold New York winter, and this very materialistic civilization filled with so much of these four sinful activities, just completely saturated with those activities. The entire civilization was like that. And he continued on, and all the while, he later explained that he understood and he felt that he was never alone, because he saw that his spiritual master was with him the whole time. And he was following the order of his spiritual master, and by that he was getting the mercy of his spiritual master, and he was getting direct association of his spiritual master. So while here Krishna is disappearing from the direct vision from Brahma, Brahma is taking that order to create the material world in his heart, and he's continuing on in that way. Let's see, what is this? A few verses ago, in the end of this last chapter, Krishna says, "By following my instructions, you can now generate the living entities as before, by dint of your complete Vedic wisdom and the body you have directly received from me, the supreme cause of everything." So Krishna is saying that he's basically giving him the benediction that you have the ability to do this now. I'm giving you the ability to generate the living entities and do all these things. Because of his Vedic, he's saying, because of Brahma's Vedic wisdom, complete Vedic wisdom, and the body that he's directly received. So similarly, we've received a specific body, and we are receiving Vedic wisdom, and because of these things, we have the ability to fulfill the order of the spiritual master, no matter how daunting it may seem, how difficult it may seem, how impossible it may seem. Because we've received these bodies, due to our own desire to enjoy material nature, but these human bodies, they come with a certain ability that animal bodies don't have. We're able to inquire into the absolute truth. We're able to begin to understand Vedic knowledge. We're able to use our mind, body, and words to serve the Lord. These are things that aren't available to the animal species of life. And so we've been awarded this body by material nature, by Krishna himself, ultimately. And because of that, we have this ability now to fulfill the orders of the spiritual master and ultimately the orders of Krishna. So now again, in this 10th chapter we're starting, Vidura is inquiring, how did this all go about? And if we go to the next verse, 3:10:2, O greatly learned one, kindly eradicate all my doubts and let me know of all that I have inquired from you from the beginning to the end. And Vidura asked all relevant questions of Maitreya because he knew well that Maitreya was the right person to reply to all the points of his inquiries. One must be confident about the qualifications of his teacher. One should not approach a layman for replies to specific spiritual inquiries. Such inquiries, when replied to with imaginative answers by the teacher, are a program for wasting time. So we see this all over the society, that spirituality or pseudo-spirituality masquerading as legitimate spirituality, as the absolute truth, when anybody and everybody is just kind of coming up with whatever they want, saying all kinds of nonsense, saying all kinds of just completely made-up ideas, mental speculations, and things that sound very flowery and sound very nice, and they might even elicit some form of emotion within the heart, and they feel very spiritual. But because people aren't understanding this very, very basic point, that the teacher of spiritual knowledge must be qualified, they're being misled in so many different ways. They're being cheated in so many different ways. And as Prabhupada said, that the society of cheaters and the cheated, and that ultimately those that are being cheated, they actually want to be cheated because the proper knowledge is out there, and ultimately hearing this proper knowledge, hearing that actually we're not meant to enjoy in this world, we're not the body, we're not the enjoyer. Krishna is the enjoyer. We're meant to give him enjoyments. We shouldn't engage in these 4 pillars of sinful life. We should, give up so many simple things like watching TV, engaging in mundane talks, engaging in frivolous sports, all these very simple things. Hearing these things is very unappealing to the conditioned living entity because we're so much under the impression that we are the enjoyer, that we feel like our happiness is our so-called enjoyment in the material world, and that by taking away all of these aspects of our mundane material so-called enjoyment, we're getting our happiness taken away from us. I was speaking to a devotee on this trip, and he opened up this Mood and Mission of Srila Prabhupada, and he was looking at the section about standards of initiation, right? And so Maharaj is explaining, he's quoting Prabhupada how it's actually that letter that's in the ashram that Prabhupada wrote, that handwritten letter. I don't remember the exact word for word what he said, but just different things like shouldn't engage in frivolous sports, shouldn't engage in idle talks, all these things. And he was going through each one word for word and asking, well, what is this? What's the explanation for this one and this one and this one? I was explaining to him, and you can just see so many people, they're so hesitant to give up these kinds of things. Eating at restaurants, engaging in sports, and watching the news and all these kinds of things. But ultimately, we have to understand that those are very important things to do, and by following these things, we can actually come to the platform of beginning devotional service. But the point is here that the qualifications of the teacher are very, very important to understand, and we have to use our intelligence to approach the spiritual master and approach a bona fide spiritual master, because otherwise, again, there's so many cheaters out there that are using very flowery language, and they have so many followers as well, because what they're giving is very cheap and very easy to attain. They can say that, oh, you can attain, enlightenment just by doing this simple, breathing exercise or whatever it is that they come up with. Chant this one mantra for 6 months and you'll become God. So they say all these things, and it attracts the living entity because our general tendency is to want to find the quickest and easiest way to do any given thing. But we have to understand that due to our conditioning over so many millions of lifetimes, it's not such an easy thing. Yes, Prabhupada did say that we can become fully Krishna conscious in one moment, but for almost all of us, that's not the case because of our anarthas, because of our hang-ups, because of our lack of faith in the process of devotional service. These things take time. It takes patience and determination and enthusiasm, and we have to go on day after day, year after year, month after month, and in our devotional service with the faith that we are becoming purified and this process is working. But again, people want the easy way out, they want the cheap way out, so they're misled by so many big, spiritual teachers, gurus that have so many followers, and it can be very attractive in that way. And you could even see that people who, according to the proper system, right? So according to Varnashram, there's the different Varnas have different roles, and so the Brahmanas are generally the spiritual teachers, right? They're the ones that are guiding the society in spiritual knowledge, and that is their role. They're the head of society, and then of course there's Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and one thing that we observed that Mahotsa Prabhu was speaking about a little bit is that you see now the trend in the society is that so there's people who are very expert musicians, right? And their role is more or less as an entertainer, as musician, entertainer. And this, traditionally, this falls under the Shudra category, right? So again, not that they're any less or anything like that, but different people have different roles, and the Shudra is generally the legs of society, right? So that's still a very important role of the body, to have legs. Without that, you can't go anywhere. But we see that the current trend is that these entertainers, these musicians who actually aren't very learned in Shastra. They don't necessarily even read Prabhupada's books, at least not consistently or thoroughly. They are not necessarily exactly following what's in Prabhupada's books, but still, because they are put on this pedestal in society of being more or less celebrities, they are looked up to as the leaders or the philosophical guides or the teachers of society. So they might be performing their music and then intersperse that music with speaking some, again, philosophy, you could say, or some ideas of their ideas on Krishna conscious philosophy. But they might be completely off. And they actually might be off in a very, very subtle way that most devotees, if they hear it, might think, yeah, that sounds really good. That sounds correct. But they might be missing one small thing that is completely throws everything off. Like, for example, this happened to us. Again, Mosa Prabhu was showing us this one video. He was giving a class on this trip, and then he showed us this one video of one devotee who's very, very popular artist, one of the big kirtan gurus, you could say. And he's, speaking about devotional service and how when he's engaging in that, he feels, so it's so nice, and he's making progress and cleaning the toilets and taking a humble position, and how he learned from this one devotee to take a very humble position. Everything he was saying sounded very nice. In order to have good kirtan, you have to have good sadhana and all these things. So he's talking all these things that are proper actually, but because he left out a very important facet of this, which is that we have to take everything on the basis of Shastra. He didn't mention that at all, and that we should read Prabhupada's books. Because of that, ultimately he was off in his philosophy or what he was saying. Because you're not emphasizing that, everything becomes, it becomes kind of more like, well, I feel like this, you feel like that, everything's okay, all paths lead to the same goal. But no, we understand, we have to follow Shastra, we have to take that as the ultimate authority. Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, and then Shastra is the ultimate authority in the end. And so because of that, because he was off in that way, he didn't properly explain that, then again, he's guiding so many, maybe thousands of devotees, and so many people are looking up to him as a spiritual guide, as a guru in a sense, right? Shiksha guru, that he's misleading them, and again, it leads to the wrong result. So again, this is the point here being made here, that Prabhupada is making this purport that Vidura is very intelligent because he's inquiring from the proper source of knowledge, Maitreya. He's understanding that, okay, Maitreya has the proper qualifications to give me actual knowledge in this regard. And we shouldn't approach a layman for replies to specific spiritual inquiries. So we should be very selective and careful, again, about who we approach for spiritual knowledge, and ensuring that that person is, the point is that the person that we're approaching for spiritual knowledge is following Shastra, and that they're referencing Shastra in whatever answers they're giving to us. Because Shastra is ultimately perfect knowledge and is untainted by any material qualities. So we're able to understand that, okay, so we must follow the person that is giving this knowledge in the proper way. And yeah, it's actually the weight of that is, generally it's on us. I mean, we have to use some discrimination and intelligence, because again, there's so many misleading people out there that it's actually up to the disciple, it's up to the one inquiring to actually use their intelligence and discriminate, again, based on, not on what's going to give me sense gratification. It shouldn't be based on, oh, I really like what this person says because it makes my heart feel this certain way and I feel so much love in my heart. But actually it should be based on, is what they're saying actually proper? Is what they're saying actually what comes in the line of disciplic succession? Is it what is said in Shastra? Is it the same thing that Krishna says? Is it the same thing that Srila Prabhupada says. And so that should be our compass in this regard, not whatever we feel in our heart, because again, our heart is misleading us in so many different ways, right? We might be very attracted to someone of the opposite gender, and in our heart we feel so many amazing things, and it feels so real, and it feels so spiritual. But we can go to the proper source of knowledge in this regard and get completely smashed in that, and see that actually no, we're completely in material consciousness. There's nothing spiritual about this at all. And I've heard devotees relate that when they came to Krishna consciousness, and then he saw a Mataji, and he felt, oh, I like her, and it's spiritual because she's a devotee and I'm a devotee. But then he went and said that to someone, and they just completely smashed him and showed him that this is complete nonsense. So again, our heart can mislead us, our mind can mislead us in so many different ways, and it's doing it every day at all moments, all times, trying to convince us that we should enjoy, that we are the body, that trying to undermine our devotional service in so many ways because of all these impurities within the heart are there. So we have to understand that, first of all, that we're not the body and the mind. That's very important to understand. We're not these emotions. We're not these thoughts. This is a very important step to distance ourselves from that. And then from there, understand, well, where should I get guidance from? What should I actually follow? And again, this example is being shown here, just like so many times in the Bhagavatam, that submitting to the bona fide spiritual master, tadvidi paripatena pariprashnena seveya, inquiring from them and rendering service to them, this is the way to properly advance in Krishna consciousness and spiritual life. So we'll go to the next verse here. Just going to keep it moving. Sutta vacha evam sanchoditastena kshatra kausha ravir munihi prita pratyahatan prashnan hridistan atta bhargava. Sutta Goswami said, O son of Bhrigu, the great sage Maitreya Muni, thus hearing from Vidura, felt very much enlivened. Everything was in his heart, and thus he began to reply to the questions one after another. Purport: the phrase Sutta Uvacha, Sutta Goswami said, appears to indicate a break in the discourse between Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami. While Shukadev Goswami was speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, Sutta Goswami was only one member of a large audience. But Sutta Goswami was speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya, headed by the sage Shaunaka, the descendant of Shukadev Goswami. This, however, does not make any substantial difference in the topics under discussion. Okay, next verse. Maitreya Uvacha Virinchopi tata chakre divyam varsha shatam tapaha atman yatmanam aveshya yathabha bhagavan ajaha. The greatly learned sage Maitreya said, O Vidura, Brahma thus engaged himself in penances for 100 celestial years, as advised by the personality of Godhead, and applied himself in devotional service to the Lord. Purport: that Brahma engaged himself for the personality of Godhead, Narayan, means that he engaged himself in the service of the Lord. That is the highest penance one can perform for any number of years. There is no retirement from such service, which is eternal and ever encouraging. So this is quite an interesting one. So penance, the word penance, it's not really such a commonly used word in modern society. Karmis don't really talk about undergoing penance. The idea is it's a very religious sounding word, and they might have some kind of association with it. I think it's related to Catholicism and confession and these kinds of things. But undergoing self-punishment. So the actual definition is voluntary self-punishment inflicted as an outward expression of repentance for having done wrong. Right? So again, this is, in modern society, it's seen as a very archaic idea that we're undergoing self-punishment, hurting ourselves or something like that, or doing something that is not pleasing to the mind or the body. But this is a very common thing seen in all different spiritual practices, all different religions, that we're undergoing some form of, again, self-punishment in order to elevate ourselves, in order to come closer to God, actually. This is a very common thing. And the very first thing that, before all of this, before Brahma got darshan of the Lord and all this, the very first sound that was heard in the universe was this tapa, this austerity, perform austerities. So it's very similar words, austerities and penance. And so while doing that, Brahma, by doing those penance or by doing those austerities, Brahma was able to take darshan of the Lord, right? And so we understand that undergoing these things, penances and austerities, helps us to advance in spiritual life, advance in Krishna consciousness. And here, though, one difference is that, so Brahma is engaging himself in penances for 100 celestial years, and he's applying himself in devotional service to the Lord. So Prabhupada is explaining here in the purport that the highest penance one can perform for any number of years is devotional service to the Lord. And then he says there's no retirement from such service. So it says he engaged himself for 100 years, but it's not that he did 100 years and then he's just, okay, now I'm just going to chill out and enjoy life. But he's eternally engaging in service to the Lord because there's no retirement from such service. It's eternal and ever encouraging, right? So again, for a materialist, this idea is so foreign that how is undergoing self-punishment encouraging for you? Like, how is it ever encouraging? And how is it that you want to do something eternally that's self-punishment, right? It doesn't make much sense for a materialist, but we understand in devotional service that, well, the first thing to understand is that this world isn't meant for our enjoyment. Actually, the human body, the human form of life, isn't meant to enjoy. It's not actually capable of enjoying so much compared to how much it's capable of suffering. And it doesn't mean that we go physically hurt ourselves, but the point of this human form of life is to undergo austerities and undergo these penances in order to advance spiritually. This is what this body is actually built for. It's designed in that way that it can undergo these things. By doing these things, actually, it's funny because, again, the materialists can't understand, but as soon as we start engaging in devotional service, we start undergoing some form of penance, right? We follow the 4 regulative principles. We wake up early, we chant 16 rounds, we attend the morning program, all these different things. We engage in services around the temple. We go distribute books, all these different things. As soon as we start engaging in that, again, for a materialist, looking from the outside in, just seeing us doing this, they might think, oh man, these people are suffering so much. This is so bad. They're having to do things that, don't seem very enjoyable. Like, they have to clean the toilet and they have to wake up early. All these things. Oh, this is horrible. This looks like torture. But actually, as soon as you start engaging in it yourself, you start to experience this ever-encouraging nature of devotional service. You start to get inspiration and you feel encouraged and you feel the bliss of Krishna consciousness. You feel that nectar, So it's just like what is poison in the beginning and becomes nectar in the end. This is what the nature of devotional service is, right? The material enjoyment that everyone is engaged in is nectar in the beginning, seems like nectar in the beginning, but it turns into poison at the end. And generally when people engage in that, though, they don't actually equate that. They don't understand that, because of my enjoying mentality, because I try to enjoy this, now I'm suffering because of that. They don't really get to that level of logic in their heads. They think, I'm suffering because of this other person, or because this situation politically, or because God did this to me. Ultimately, they come up with so many excuses. It's never their own fault. It's always someone else's fault or God's fault or whatever. But we can understand that, again, it's everything that's happening to us ultimately is our own fault. It's a result of our own actions, and we're just simply getting what we deserve. But the point is, yes, if we engage in this devotional service, it may seem like poison in the beginning. And again, from the outside, it seems like poison. And even coming into devotional service, sometimes you can feel like, oh man, not again, I have to do this. This is hard. And in the morning, chanting our rounds can be difficult. We're fighting with the mind, and it seems, this is so difficult. This is like poison. But again, it becomes nectar in the end is the point. That the more we engage in it, the more consistent we are, and the more we associate with devotees, read Bhagavatam, chant our rounds, all these things, the more and more we develop a taste for this, and the more it becomes actually pleasing. And so while it is penance, it is self-punishment in a way, because we're in this material world in order to reform ourselves. This is a reformation facility for the conditioned living entity that has the wrong idea that we are the enjoyer. Because of that, it seems like difficulty, and we have to go through this self-punishment, this difficulty of deconditioning our minds and deconditioning our minds from the idea that we can enjoy, that we are the enjoyer, and reconditioning properly to understand that we are Jiver Swarupoy Krishna Nitya Das. We're the servant of Krishna, and engaging full-heartedly in this. What is this? Savaipum samparo dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshare ahaitukya pratiyata yayatma suprasidati. The suprasidati, only this unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional service is capable of completely satisfying the self. This is the only way we can actually become completely satisfied. Not through any kind of sense gratification, not through going to the best kirtan and just really enjoying the kirtan, but actually, how do we perform kirtan in such a way that Krishna becomes pleased? How do we, become seen by Krishna? Come to the state where actually what we're doing is actually giving pleasure to Krishna himself. One other anecdote is that when Bhrigupati Prabhu was here, Mahotsa Prabhu was telling me that Bhrigupati Prabhu asked Mahotsa Prabhu, what do you want? Like what's your desire? And Mahotsa Prabhu said, I want to give extreme pleasure to my spiritual master. And Bhrigupati Prabhu said, I think that's actually the correct answer, because I was going to say that I think he said that I want to, be with Krishna or something like that. But actually, no, it's about giving that extreme pleasure to the spiritual master and to Krishna. And through that, we get that secondary, we enjoy on a secondary level. We're the secondary enjoyers. We're not the primary enjoyers. We enjoy when Krishna enjoys. We enjoy when the spiritual master enjoys. And so this is something we have to, again, hear it so many times over and over and over again, and it might become repetitive, but this is something we need to hear. Prabhupada's classes that he gave were very basic philosophy many of the times, and simple philosophy, and you're not the body, you're a servant of Krishna, you have to follow the four regulative principles, etc., etc., etc. But this is the level that we're generally on, especially as Westerners, that we have to hear these simple things over and over again and be reminded of them day by day. Another anecdote I wanted to share about this is that, there's no retirement from such service, which is eternal and ever encouraging. This devotional service is really eternal, and we can see that. And again, you just compare devotees to materialists, and you see, this is something I contemplate quite a lot, is that, in material life, now in the Karmi society, they have this concept of, it's called FIRE, F-I-R-E, financial independence, retire early. So people have there's whole communities of this online where their goal is you finish school and then you get a nice high-paying job, the best job you possibly can when you're like 22. And then you work, and you live very, very frugally. You live as cheaply as possible, and you save all your money. You save all the money and you invest it in whatever stocks and stuff like that. And you get to a point within maybe 10 years where you're 32, 35, where you can actually just completely retire. You're able to just live off of your savings and your investments and all that. And so there's people that it's like they're racing to get to that point, right? They're doing everything they can to get to the point of retirement where I don't have to work, because everyone realizes that working is like just completely miserable. But so they've engineered some very clever way that I can actually get out of this rat race within only 10 or 15 years, so I don't have to spend until I'm 65. I don't have to work like that. So there's many people that do this and they're successful in that. And then on the flip side, we also see people that they work. And maybe they're a teacher or something like that or whatever. And ultimately, it is quite suffering. Like they're not so it's not just absolutely blissful to do that. There might be some rewarding aspect to it, right? That you're enriching the lives of children and helping them in their life and all these kinds of things. But ultimately, it's nowadays, I mean, so many teachers quit after just a few years because the kids are so bad nowadays, and having to grade all the tests, like it's very monotonous work actually what they're doing. So it's not so enjoyable. But the point is that maybe they work their whole life like this. They get to the age of retirement and they retire for 2-3 years, and then what do? They go back to work. My parents have said this to me actually, that they don't think they'll ever retire, because what are they going to do? The point is, when you retire, what do you do exactly? Like I've seen my grandpa, he's been retired for basically my whole life, and all day he just sits and watches Fox News. Like, it's just extremely boring, life. What do you do with your life? So these people, they get bored with retirement and they just go back to work because they don't know what else to do. So it's not that they're blissfully engaged in their career, but they just simply don't know what to do. So you have these two people, these people that are wanting to retire and these people that don't know what to do when they retire. But the point is, when you look at devotees, what is happening is that they're eternally engaged in this devotional service. And even in so-called old age, that the body is getting older, they're still fully absorbed and fully engaged in Krishna consciousness. We see so many examples. Again, Brigupati Prabhu is a good example. His whole life doing the same thing, going on book distribution day in, day out, and now his body is, I think, in his late 70s, and he's still going the same, not changing at all. We see this with Bhakti Vikas Maharaj. It's just going on and on and on, not slowing down at all. There's no question of retirement or anything like that. It's not like an idea of, okay, now I can just like sit back and relax. But he's just going on. And we saw again, what a great example with Srila Prabhupada himself. To the very last moment, he was preaching and giving his Bhaktivedanta purports. We see, we see the amount that can be achieved with a lifetime of service to the Lord, the absolute, just the breadth and the amount of output that can happen. We see Prabhupada wrote so many books just in that short period of time, 10 years or so. So many books came out that Prabhupada wrote. And then we see, again, other devotees like Danavir Maharaj was at this festival, and you see how many books has he written. He's translated so many books and written so many books, huge sets of books. Again, Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, so many books that he's produced and written. Shivram Maharaj, again, so many books he's written. So the amount of damage you can actually do when you give your whole life like that is really inconceivable. And again, Brigupati Prabhu, back to how many books has he distributed? Over 1 million books, Over 1 million books he's distributed in his life. It's just inconceivable how much damage that has done to the age of Kali. And so we see the result of this eternal engagement in devotional service. We see the result of giving our whole lives. Even devotees that maybe aren't so prolific or on that celebrity status, you could say, simple devotees like Kamalini Mataji and Purva Prabhu give their whole life, and they're still going on and on, even though they have health problems, and they're Mataji's been sick for 2 months. Still, she's going on. She came to this festival. She flew all the way there and set up her book table, and she's still distributing books on and on and on and on. And she came to the Shravan Kirtan camp here too. So she's just traveling and distributing books and not giving up at all, not letting up at all, not slowing down, even though again the body is getting to this, towards its last stages, the dwindling stages. So yeah, I just find that very inspirational that devotees, when they have that taste for preaching and for Krishna consciousness, they continue on and on and on and on and on. And they don't have any idea of, well, let me just kind of stop and just slow down, and I won't perform devotional service anymore. That's never in their minds. That thought never comes up. So it's really, you can see practically the truth of what Prabhupada is saying right here. You can see it, it's being said in the Bhagavatam, but we can actually see it in our real life, how it applies. So it's quite inspiring. Okay, it's 8:35. I'll stop there. If there's any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. Suresh Prabhu.
This point that is, I was kind of this point that eternal service.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've watched, speaking of Bigger Party, he has that YouTube interview with that famous Christian preacher. And in the interview, the preacher, he's like, this is where I thought I had it. And then he's like, then he surprised me. And then it goes on, and like, Bigger Party Guru asks him, like, if Jesus were to come on the campus, what would you do? And then the guy says, I'd fall on my face, because it says in the Bible, no one's ever seen his face, so I bow down. He's like, okay, then what else? And he's like, and then I would say, Lord, you're the only way, the truth, and the light. He's like, what else? And then he says something else, but then Bigger Party Guru, he's like, I'll tell you what I'd do. And he says like all that, but then he's like, and then I'd ask him, dear Lord, how may I serve you?
Yeah.
And so like, I guess like, that's not such a prominent emphasized like aspect of other religions. It seems that they have some material desire for liberation, and then they understand that they'll enjoy even more in heaven. But there's really not like an ideal. And then someone mentioned this before. It's come up like some also famous preacher. He said, or maybe just someone met is like, I'll go to heaven and I'll like serve for like 100 years, and then I'm gonna enjoy or something after that.
Yeah, the Archbishop of Canterbury, I think I heard, and then he said, "What will you do in heaven?" He said, "I'll glorify God for 100 years, and then I'll enjoy for eternity." Yeah.
So that's like their idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like in the Bible, but they don't really have a conception of like what's gonna happen. Like this understanding that actually like the service is itself the perfection. As long as we are able to engage in that, then we should be satisfied.
Yeah.
That's a really nice point, and I think a lot of people appreciated that, to see that on display, like in that video, even though it's his channel, and all of his goons are there, like still people are like, wow, this is like a really like wise person, and glorifying Bigger Party Guru, they were really impressed. So
Yeah. It's really nice. Yes, please.
I was wondering if you could clarify, you're talking about this instance of some big kirtan acharya, and you were saying everything he was saying was philosophically in line, but it was the fact that he didn't mention Prabhupada's books that makes him bogus. Like, I was wondering if you could clarify it, because it sounds like, okay, we need to talk about books, like every sentence.
It was, well, the problem was that he was saying all these, okay, you should engage in devotional service, you should be humble, you should chant your rounds, do your sadhana. All these things are correct. But because he didn't say that you should study Shastra and follow what it says, therefore it's misleading, because then people could get the idea that I can do these things, but then I could have wrong philosophical ideas. Or I could, have any guru would be fine, because whatever they say is good, as long as they say those things. But the point is, you have to make Shastra is the center, right? And that studying Srila Prabhupada's books is the center. And I mean, Prabhupada gave the order to study his books. So by not doing that, we're not following the orders of the spiritual master. So that's an offense to the holy name. Shuchi Shastra Nindanam. Right.
If you didn't condemn Prabhupada's books, or if you didn't speak out of line, if you didn't speak out of line, I don't see the issue.
you're saying the way it was presented, it seemed like it was just mundane, like welfare or something.
No. Anyways, I can show it to you later and explain it more. It's probably you have to see it. I don't want to show it in the class, but
it's probably a subtle thing.
Yeah, it's very subtle.
The
point was that we watched it, like he showed it to all of us, and then he was like, "Sounds good, right?" And we're like, "Yeah." Like, none of us were like, "No, this is bogus," because it seemed like, "Yeah, this is all correct." But then he pointed out, actually, see, because this isn't there, that following Shastra, then so many other ideas can come in, right? You can have the idea of worshiping demigods could come in. The misunderstanding that I'm meant to enjoy the kirtan or something like that. This enjoying mentality can come in because we're not taking things on a philosophical basis based on Shastra, right? So that's extremely important to follow the proper siddhanta. Then, otherwise, as soon as that becomes not under the, as the center, then it's so easy to just deviate. And right, maybe what he's doing is bona fide now, but what to speak of, like, if he has disciples and they also have the same idea that, well, yeah, just do this, do that. It's so easy to get deviated because you don't have that central compass of Shastra that's rooting. It's like the foundation of everything, right? That if you must follow that. So.
But if everything he's speaking is in line with Shastra, then what makes his preaching neglectful of Shastra?
Well, again, that Shruti Shastra Nindanam, to like.
The blasphemy of Vedic literature.
Yeah, but by ignoring them, that's like also like. Yeah. I mean, somebody could say you're not the body. They're speaking what's in Shastra, but then they might say some wrong things, right? But not necessarily. But the point is, it's like a fine line. Like, it can easily lead to that if you're not like studying Prabhupada's books thoroughly every single day. Like, he didn't emphasize that, like studying Prabhupada's books. It's like do kirtan, do some service, but it's very important. I mean, the first step is shravan, right? We have to hear from the proper authorities before we can do all these other things. I mean, the first step is to have the proper philosophical understanding. And it's something that we have to emphasize over and over and over again.
I guess the point is, if someone's taking the position of being a leader,
Mm-hmm.
they don't encourage their followers to read Prabhupada's books.
Yeah.
They only encourage their followers to listen to the kirtan and
Yeah.
do some service.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point is that as a leader should always encourage disciples to understand things properly.
Yeah. And you see, I mean, there's many examples. Like Prabhupada, when he came to the West, he wrote that song, Marking Bhagavad Dharma. And in that he's not emphasizing, I'll just give them kirtan, I'll just give them prasad. He's saying actually, the way they'll become purified is through hearing the Bhagavatam. Through repetitive hearing of the Bhagavatam, they'll become purified. So he's emphasizing that. And then just see how Prabhupada did. I mean, he set up the morning program in order to have Bhagavatam class every day, right? So there's kirtan and there's also hearing, hearing Bhagavatam. And then he also encouraged, read my books. He super encouraged that. He's writing my book. I'm writing my books for my disciples. But then we go to these kind of events like this, and philosophy is takes a complete backseat, right? Like, it's just 14 hours of kirtan, and there's a Bhagavatam class, but it's most people don't go to that. And it's just any kind of philosophical aspect of Krishna consciousness is completely taking a back seat, right? And so you see that. So it should be equally emphasized. It should be emphasis on hearing the proper philosophy. And again, the point that I was making is that because it's not so appealing, especially conditioned living entities, to hear these things that are difficult to hear, like sadhu cuts and all these things, it can be difficult. So the general tendency can be, well, let's just chant Hare Krishna because it's very nice. It's very it enlivens the senses, and it can easily gets into that enjoying mentality, right? Whereas if you're getting the proper philosophical, it's you're getting all your misconceptions, you're getting cut, you're getting just smashed. It's not enjoyable, but it's needed, right? So Prabhupada, he didn't oh, well, this might not be enjoyable for them, so I won't say this. No, he just spoke exactly as it is, right? And he adapted things for time, place, and circumstance. But ultimately, it's said in the Muda Mission that Tamal Krishna Goswami has a quote there. He said that I don't remember the exact wording, but basically, in terms of the structure of the organization, Prabhupada was very liberal in terms of how to change different things. But in terms of the actual philosophy, he was dogmatically conservative. So he's completely following, his Guru Maharaj and the Parampara in that way. And so that's an important thing to understand. That's how we can understand what can be changed and what shouldn't be changed, basically. Yeah. Anything else? Yes, Prabhu.
I had two comments. One, I've had the experience of attending a couple of these kirtan festivals in my life. And you were speaking about this point about how most people there, they think the kirtan there is for their enjoyment. And I can definitely attest to this point because so many times when my friends and I would be there, we would like look at like the kirtan list and we'd be like, oh yeah, we'll go to this kirtan, but we'll definitely skip this one. Like, oh yeah, this one looks like it'll be fired up, but this one like, nah, let's not like go to that one. Let's like go play soccer instead. Just like there's like this idea of like, which kirtan will give me the most enjoyment. And a good important point on this also is that there's no real emphasis on, okay, the person that I should be hearing kirtan from isn't the one who's the most musically talented, but the one who's actually chanting the most purely. We would be like, oh yeah, who's like playing the mridanga? Can they do it like nicely? Can they like play it loud? Or can the singer sing like an elaborate melody that makes you feel really nice? But the emphasis should really be on, who's actually practicing.
Yeah.
And following, who's actually chanting the holy name purely. Because then you're actually getting attracted to the pure holy name. Otherwise, you're just being attracted still by like the mundane music. Or you're in the kirtan, but you're not at the same time. And then another point also, I was at the airport yesterday, distributing books on the south side, and I met this powerful dude. And you were speaking about how the point of human life is actually to engage in sacrifice, and that's like what human beings sort of have to give to society. And he was like making this point, like he was like the spiders, they make webs, the bees, they pollinate the flowers. What does the human do? What is the purpose of human life? And like he was acting like he was like blew my mind. And then I was like, yeah, the human form of life is meant for sacrifice, and through that sacrifice, one is actually meant to understand God. But he just like couldn't conceive it. Oh, here we go again with his dogma. But he like couldn't understand that the goal of life is actually to sacrifice. Because even though he has this high understanding that what human beings are doing, it's not right, they're just exploiting, he still has this enjoying mentality that, you say that I have to sacrifice, but if I sacrifice, how can I enjoy it? He just like wasn't able to understand that because he still had himself in the center and as the enjoyer. And even though he recognized the existence of God, he was sort of saying, okay, how does God want me to enjoy? So, but we can see by engaging in this process of sacrifice, it actually teaches one to put God in the center, so we can actually free ourselves from this mentality. And those are just two important points you made in your class.
Yeah, it was nice. I mean, at this festival, like, it was really intense. I mean, Giri and Mahotsa Prabhu were like at that table from like 8 a.m. to like 11 p.m. every day. They just like go, and there's just so many people, and me and Vishal were just like running around, had to like go like run errands and do this and do that, get the prasadam and so many things. But it was like really blissful. Like I was pretty blissed out because we were just fully engaged in like, serving and doing all these different things. And it was pretty intense, and it was like really tiring, but it was like really blissful. So I feel like we got the real, huh? Yeah, especially with Vishal, yeah. We got the, the mercy, because we were just like engaged, okay, just like do the sacrifice, and just it's not about our, I mean, that place was like the thing, like mecca of like enjoyment. Like it was like this huge resort, and like there's 3 pools, and like it was like a heavenly planet or something. But we're just trying to like, just do service. So we didn't get distracted by that enjoyment mentality that everyone was in, I was just walking around, like I had to like keep my bead bag with me the whole time, because like it takes like 20 minutes just to walk through that place. And like if I wasn't chanting, I noticed like immediately my mind is like, oh, like, this is like an enjoyable place. But if I just like kept chanting, I was able to like, okay, I got to do the service. This service is nice, but yeah. Okay. Anything else from the men? No. Matajis? Anything? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyascha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.